Okay, so our next presentation is joining us from Aberdeen, Scotland, and this is Joe Vergunst, who is writing, whose presentation is called Working Out Landscape and Time. Joe is a senior lecturer in anthropology at the University of Aberdeen in Scotland. He has carried out research on people's everyday relationships with their landscapes, focusing on farming, walking, and cultural heritage. He also teaches ethnographic research methods. So Joe, are you ready?
I think so. They were really professional. I'm going to be a lot less professional. So I'm going to share my screen and see if I can get that to work. Okay, then. So this is about working out ideas of landscape and time, including but not limited to past, present and future. So I'm going to draw on my anthropological fieldwork with farmers in Orkney, which I've been carrying out for a number of years now. You can see Orkney at the top of the map, just off mainland Scotland there, and also on cultural heritage in Aberdeenshire in northeast Scotland. And so I'm going to talk about how future landscapes emerge through working the land and yet might also be constrained and closed off. And this is where I'm getting at ideas of justice. So my question is, we have tended to understand landscapes as a repository of the past. So layers of historical influence, or how we can conceive of landscapes then, and not just being about the past, but also about the present and the future. And in Orkney, the pictures you're seeing here, I've written about the senses of production and productivity in the land that farmers in Orkney and the communities around them, they value, but also their feelings of regret that what they saw as the past structure of family farming was becoming more and more difficult to maintain. But at the same time, they talk about the progress, or sometimes regrets again in lack of progress, towards making the landscape how they would actually like it to be in the future. So this is a picture of land reclamation, where they cut out the hillside to make grass fields, which the farmers would see as a future-oriented activity. And also that the way that the farmers would change the layout of their farm buildings to suit their purposes going forward for the future better. So the contrast between farming and the landscape as heritage in the past, with the experience of farmers that are actually trying to work towards the future all the time. So let's go to Aberdeenshire now, and the hill of Benahee, which is it's a popular local landmark. And this is about heritage, not as the past or what has passed, but as a connection between the past and the present and the future. And so myself and Aberdeen colleagues have been working with a community group called the Baileys of Benahee, with a focus on the 19th century crofting settler colony that existed on its slopes, surrounded by modern farmland now, as you can see. So these colonists, as they were known, set up dwellings around the hill, and the land was collectively owned by the neighbouring estates, but it was understood as an open resource. And so we set up the Benahee Landscapes Project with the community to explore this. So as we dug test pits and in excavation, we all reflected on the richness of the topsoil, and we saw the plough marks going deep into the subsoil, and we admired the well-made granite houses, and we came to understand the landscape as a whole as testament to the labour, the work of the colonists, the people who settled there, and to improve the soil and really build the landscape as their own future. The pottery that we've found around the houses it's pretty ordinary for this kind of site, but it's often, you know, it's nicely coloured, it's well made. They're kind of nice pieces, and it actually made us think of the crofters not so much as marginalised hill dwellers just scraping a living, but actually thinking about their future. But the point is that the future didn't work out for them. This is an example of the conditions that were put on their rents as the land was divided up and taken into ownership, direct ownership by the surrounding estates. And so gradually the land became depopulated. In Orkney too, not all farm families now that I speak to are happy with how things are compared to when I first met them. So investments don't work out. The wind turbines that are ubiquitous up there now, the big investment for the farmers didn't always turn out what they were hoping to be. So I wonder what would happen, and if it would help us to think about a just landscape if time wasn't just the linear historical narrative, maybe sedimented into layers that you can look at archaeologically and were just read from the surface, because sometimes futures don't always work out. And if indeed we experience the landscape not as a visual summary of the past, but a whole series of futures, some that are realized temporarily or permanently, some that are aborted or sidelined, and some of them imagined, and some of them made real, and so on. So this is one of the starting points for a new research network that I wanted to bring up here, which is part of a wider program here in the UK on landscape decision making. And I guess the premise of the program is that decisions could be made better about landscapes. And so we're exploring arts and humanities approaches to this question. These are the objectives of the new network that we have that you can have a look at for a second or two, if you like. And so the idea is that we meet as an inter-trans multidisciplinary network, artists and archaeologists and heritage people, social scientists, and others, to work together on some of these big themes. And here we are before coronavirus in February 2020, probably giving each other coronavirus. I don't know. And so the idea actually is that we're going to be working on some small-scale experimental arts and humanities activities about landscape decision-making and times of change. So these are a couple of examples from the network that we have. Colin Shepherd's going to be using historical perspectives to inform contemporary land management. And we're basically starting to explore a whole series of mini experiments. It doesn't have to be in Scotland. And so basically, if anyone's interested in this stuff, you're really welcome to get in touch, and we'd love to develop some more conversations around all of this kind of theme. And that's me.
Excellent. Thank you, Joe. It's funny that one of the things about lockdown is that not only are we dreaming of the restaurants that we'd like to go to, but somehow the landscapes that we've always wanted to visit are so tangibly distant. And I've never been to Orkney, and I would love to go. So I will have to come up and visit with you up there. I'm also minded in your presentation, you showed us the labor in the landscape, and Raymond Williams, of course, famously wrote that a working country can hardly ever be called a landscape. And Don Mitchell recently refuted that in a lovely way by just saying a landscape is nothing but work.
Those are really nice comments. Yeah, great quotes. I'll have to follow up on one of those two things. But that sense of actually involvement and work, I think, has always been so important to my sense of landscape here, and that combined with a sense of time, I think, is what makes it really meaningful for me.
I do have one point of clarification that I'd like to ask, though, and that's, why didn't the wind turbines work?
They turned out to be partly not the returns that people were hoping for, but actually they need a lot of maintenance. Stuff goes wrong with them. They're online some of the time, they're offline some of the time, and it's not just because the wind it isn't always blowing, although if you do come up to Orkney sometime, you will find it does blow there most of the time. But like these kind of promises of technology, you know, it's they just need repairing, and they need work, and they need labor to actually maintain them. You know, they need that kind of more consistent input rather than just a one-off investment at the start.
I think there might be another question here that can be answered immediately, and it's, how does one contend with the premise of the landscape decisions program that landscape decisions ought to be made better?
Yeah, in the sense of potentially a critique of it. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, maybe I'm reading too much into that. I think people, if they're not familiar with the landscape decisions program that's run by the UKRI at the moment, it'd be well worth people having a look at that, because there's a whole range of stuff going on through that. I think it's probably what's going to happen is people are going to find examples, hopefully, of where landscape decisions, that sort of best practice thing, where people are finding these ways of making landscapes work at different kind of scales and different kind of time frames. And so I guess it's not going to be a universal answer to these kinds of big questions.
Okay, great. Thank you, Joe. That was excellent.
Thanks.